Okay, I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, October 15th, 2019 pre-agenda meeting of the Idaho County Board of Commissioners. And at this time, I would ask Beth Jones to please review any adjustments to the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman Mallory. We have two adjustments. The first is to remove economic development from closed session. And the second adjustment is to add personnel to closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A6.
That's A6?
Yes, sir.
Any additional adjustments?
One small announcement under unfinished business at 7.
Okay. And we may want to discuss under new business. I'd like to maybe get some information and direction to the staff, generally concerning ETJ process, as well as the status of ETJ projected requests that may be out there. I think we just all need to hear a little bit about that. Okay. We have one appointment before the board this evening, and that's a presentation by David Hughes from Nest Homes to request a temporary construction easement. And let's see, Matthew, is he here? There you are. Matthew, come on up, and why don't you just give us a preview on that.
Chairman Mallory, are you wanting him to give a preview regarding the request from Nest Homes?
Yeah.
I think that might be better suited for Ms. Valdez, maybe, or myself regarding their request. I'm not sure.
That's correct.
Okay, I wasn't sure if Mr. Todd was involved in that or not.
What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Well, that's fine. I think it's been communicated. And now it's up between Beth and Lisa. Who's going to grab it?
I'll be brief. This is a follow-up request. Nest Homes previously requested from you all temporary construction easements and at the same time a storm drainage easement. That was over a year ago, I think, at this point. You granted the storm drainage easement, but we're not inclined to grant the temporary construction easement because of the condition the property would be left in. And he has made a revision to that and made another request, and based on the prior between Beth and I, we thought it was more appropriate that he come to you all directly and make that request, and so he'll be here this evening for that purpose.
And this was where the grade of that
Correct.
large
Yes.
drop-off was pretty steep.
And it's let loose. Part of it's already slid down. I think they've stabilized it some, but I think there's more work to be done.
That part's not on the county's property.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then we have a public hearing on proposed text amendments to Land Development Code. Well, Matthew, that is you, I presume. Unless you want to throw that bone to somebody else.
Ms. Valdez, would you like to comment on it?
I'll be glad to. This is the text amendment that we've been discussing for a while, essentially dealing with the stump dumps that's already in our code, and then trying to make some provisions for, I'll say, a new type use or business, and that's what we're referring to as the source reduction facility. That would include somebody that's grinding product, those air curtain burners that we've been discussing. So again, since this thing's been advertised for the public hearing, we've really not heard any comments from the community, but I'll go over it in a little more detail at 7.
Okay. Well, we reviewed this 2 weeks ago. I was curious if you'd gotten any kind of response from any developers or
We have not heard from
neighbors or anything
anybody.
like that. Okay.
I had one quick little question here. In section I, in salary uses, right at the last sentence of that said that existing operations shall require a revision of the special use permit. If a company has a special use permit to do that, does that special use permit mature and then they have to reapply for it? And is that when it would be revisited? Or if this ordinance goes into place, then would everyone with the special use permit that this pertains to, would they have to come back in and redo theirs?
Yeah, our intent on that is for the existing facilities that are out there that got a special use permit under the old rules, if they want to add the feature, they have to come back. If they want to just keep operating like they've been doing, that's fine. But if they want to add that, then they'd have to come back through the special use permit.
For instance, like the Byrne air curtain thing.
Yes.
If they wanted to add that component to their now operation, it'd have to go back through the special use
Right.
process.
But if they're not changing anything with their operation, they do not have to come back through.
They'll keep getting up just like they are.
Yes,
And that special use permit does not expire?
correct.
Okay, it doesn't mature at all. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. Any further questions? Good to go. All right. Okay, then we roll into the administrative matters that are appropriate for our consideration for a consent agenda. And Ms. Jones, if you please tee those off.
Thank you, Chairman Mallory. The first item, and Major Todd Carver is here to make this request, is a request from the Sheriff's Office for approval of Budget Amendment Number 7 to accept a JAG grant.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, Chairman Mallory, members of the board. I came back in August and requested permission to submit an application to the U.S. Department of Justice for this Edwin Byrne grant. And that grant's now been approved, and we're just asking permission now to go ahead and accept it and be able to go ahead and get that project on the ground. Just to refresh your memory, that's for the Sheriff's Athletic League. The money that we're going to use for that is a total of $16,797, and that's what we run the Sheriff's Athletic League with. And then there's also an equipment purchase component of this grant as well.
Well, it's a great program.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all for.
Been doing it for like 10 years now. It's been very successful, and we want to make sure we continue that. So,
How much does this grant cover in terms of the operational cost of that?
it covers everything.
Everything.
Everything other than, we have some employee volunteers and things of that nature who do some stuff, but it covers the referees, it covers equipment, everything, insurance, all that stuff's included in the grant.
Any other questions for Major Carver?
Consent.
Consent.
Consent?
Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am.
The next item is a request from EMS, and Blair Ritchie is here to make this request for approval of Budget Amendment Number 8 to accept funds to continue the support efforts of the Community Response Support Team.
Good evening. We're here to accept or request approval to accept $10,000 that was awarded to us by the ABC Board of Statesville in response of what Beth said, the Community Response Support Team.
Any questions for Blair? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
The next item is a request from Planning and Development, and Matthew Todd is here to request the consideration for calling for a public hearing on November the 5th, 2019, in regard to a request by Joyce Johnson to release zoning and subdivision jurisdiction to the town of Mooresville.
Okay. Todd?
This is just the request for the call for the public hearing at this point. Properties at the corner, it's a commercial property at the corner of Rocky River and Shears Road. They are under contract for a commercial development, and they need water and sewer. Thus, they're asking for a release of jurisdiction. Be happy to answer any other questions with this one.
This is right across from where the Dollar General went in, isn't it?
Correct. So Mooresville has basically all the frontage at that intersection if this was released.
Matthew, with on the first map that we had in our packet, it shows that the site where the primary residence is looks like it's in white, And then the next map that we have shows that the corner and her primary residence is included.
It is both pieces. The white is because it still is residential where the other's commercial, even though it's all in the land use plan for future commercial.
So the back map's just showing the land use plan.
Correct.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Consent.
Consent?
Consent.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Very much, Matthew.
The next item is a request from Tax Administration, and Malia Miller is here to explain this request. And it is request for denial of taxpayers' requests for refunds that do not meet the statutory requirement.
Good evening.
Hey, how are you?
Each of you has a copy of the packets that was submitted. There are 4 different requests for refunds that we feel should be denied. These requests do not meet the requirements of the Machinery Act because taxes were not imposed through a clerical error, an illegal tax, or for an illegal purpose. If you have questions about any specific details on any of these packets, I'll be happy to answer them.
I do have, Ms. Miller, I read that thing all the way through. That was quite a thick little packet this month. But I guess I understand because of the statutory requirements, you see the 3 little areas at the bottom that meet the statutes. What do you do in a situation like this? We're denying the refund on 2019, but what do we do going forward? Do those folks still pay tax on that stuff?
Well, we have 4 different situations. The property that was measured incorrectly, the real estate, that has been corrected for 2020.
Okay.
So going forward,
that has a remedy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The others will depend on who actually owns the property January 1st. The 2 that were in bankruptcy, if that property was surrendered, but the owners still own it, although it was surrendered. If it transfers prior to 1/1/20, then a new owner will be responsible. The watercraft on the one that was a consignment, that property is already sold. So that's a new owner, 1/1/20.
Right, so they'll be the owner of record on 1/1/20,
Yes.
so that's got a remedy to it.
Yes, but the taxes that are outstanding are valid for
Yeah,
2019 and prior years.
The problem with those collateral that's been surrendered, but the creditor does not want to pick it up or does not want to foreclose on it, remains in the owner's name and the taxes accrue. But it's like a timeshare, they don't want to take those things back. And it's just not worth their time or trouble. And in some cases, they don't want to own property that may be falling into disrepair or whatever. So the owners are stuck in this sort of limbo where they don't want it, they've surrendered it, they don't owe the money on it anymore because that's been discharged in bankruptcy, but it's still on the property tax rolls. So realistically, the only way for them to get it off the property tax rolls is for the tax office to do a sale, So I would communicate to them that that is an option that they have. If they just don't pay the tax, then you can go through the process of selling it and getting whatever you want out of it. And if that pays the tax, then somebody has a new boat.
And that supersedes any other liens, correct?
That's correct.
That's right. So their other option, frankly, is to continue to use the boat and pick it up and use it and pay their taxes. But if the lien holder doesn't even want it, they don't have to make the payments. They just have the use of a boat that they'll never own, free and clear of a lien. They can't transfer it to somebody.
Can't insure it.
Yeah, they can insure it because they're the legal owner.
They're still the legal owner.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Is there any legislation at state level to deal with such as that? Or I've never heard of that from the time I've sat on the bench that this ever happened before.
I don't know, but I think it happens frequently, and I think there's a lot of confusion with the taxpayer. One lady on one of these packets was convinced it had been sold because she surrendered it and she thought it had been sold, but it hasn't.
Well, you need to tell them to contact their attorney.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions
consent?
on that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item is a request from Tax Administration for approval of September refunds and releases, and there are no commissioners' names on this list.
You dodged the bullet again, Tommy.
I did. I certainly did. Happened one time 20 years ago, and I've never been able to live it down.
Consent?
Consent.
Then the final item is a request from Finance Department, and Deb Cheek is here, for adoption of a resolution making certain findings and determinations in connection with the proposed issuance of school and community college bonds.
Okay.
Good evening. This is a resolution that will need to come before the board at the 7 o'clock meeting, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or give you a little highlight of what this is. This is the first step in our issuance of school bonds. And you have to make a resolution determining certain findings, determinations. You're also authorizing me to file an application with the Local Government Commission, authorizing me to work with bond counsel, who we've already talked to, and that will be can't think of their name all of a sudden. We've worked with them for several years, and they just changed their name. Womble Bond Dickinson, and then it'll also, I'm sorry, and that's it. It allows me to do the application, bond counsel, and then determine certain findings. I can go through those findings if you would like for me to do that at this point, or I can do that at the 7 o'clock meeting.
I think if you do that at the 7 o'clock meeting, I think that'd be important to have read into the record, even though this is part of the record.
Yes, sir.
Just for the benefit of it. Any questions of Deb?
And the findings, that all is public information, correct?
Yes, it's very generic information. I will list that out at 7, but
So that lets the voters have a more informed position when they vote.
yes, you're pretty much saying that you've been presented with the information that there is a need, that you stated that there will be a tax increase, how it will be paid for, how the funding will happen. Those are the findings. As you're saying, we've determined that these schools need to be built and that bonds need to be issued.
And Mr. Chairman, I have the
Subject to referendum.
Yes. Yes.
I have the specific wording for that too at the appropriate time.
And I understand that I need to actually introduce the resolution. Is that prior to you discussing it, I presume? Okay.
Yes, please, if you will.
I'll do that, and then you'll discuss it, and then you got the motion.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
We're good to go. Thank you very much, Deb. Okay, proceeding on down, there are no announcements of vacancies, no appointments to any boards. Unfinished business. Gene, is that going to be at 7 o'clock? Or?
7. Just short announcement.
This is a public comment period, so we'll see if we have anyone signed up. New business, I just thought it would be helpful to have a quick discussion on ETJ and the different kinds of ETJ that we deal with, and some of the changes. I think since Ken, you were on the board, we did arrive at an agreed upon change with Mooresville in terms of how frequently they put forward their annexation determinations, and it went from annual to semi-annual because, as you recall, a lot of times that ETJ period was running a very long period of time, and they were very concerned about not getting information from the town and some final disposition as far as its annexation. So that seems to be working all right. Have you seen any difficulties with the voluntary annexation side? No, I haven't either. The other type of ETJ extension is requested by the town, for the municipalities. And we've had some requests from the town of Mooresville to take a look at areas all surrounding Mooresville in every direction. But we've looked at those, and I wonder if you can discuss with maybe Matthew, in terms of the ETJ, the question I have is, there's a lot of benefit to be able to bring some common standards for roads in particular, relative to sidewalks and curb and guttering and all that. And the way you look at the voluntary annexation piece, it's a piece here and a piece there, and it just goes down the road, but there are gaps between those developments oftentimes. So it seems to me to be a very prudent thing to try to look and see whether or not you can have that all developed to the same standards from the get-go once they start reaching a certain density, I suppose.
The difference, though, I think, is kind of in the past, is for commercial corridors and stuff that we granted ETJ because Mooresville also does a transportation planning. You know, we didn't want this big change in the way the businesses looked, such as on 150, that in this imaginary line, you know, you go from basically, you know, I mean, the town of Mooresville was, you know, they made it where it was going to be kind of a little bit more upscale business. And with our zoning, somebody can put in a used car lot with little flapping flags and all that kind of good stuff, which is somewhat incompatible with that. So in some cases, we've granted ETJ just kind of make the corridors in the road along the road networks coming into the town. For private residences, we've typically done it when they requested it and did not do it involuntarily. And then of course, the gray areas, you're right, when all of a sudden it, you know, it looks like an ink blot, then of course Mooresville's going to want to fill them in. And the question is, what do we do with property owners that say no? So,
in light of our recent ETJ issues and complaints from citizens, I'd like to maybe see if we would consider putting this on our retreat in November and having a really in-depth review with staff about, you know, the moving forward, how we do it, and the corridors, and maybe just relook at that in depth.
Yep. You know, I think it would be helpful to know, because when you grant ETJ, you grant the whole thing, and then that starts to include, if someone has a 100-acre farm, now when they put up an outbuilding or something, it may not conform with Mooresville, you know, building or guidelines or whatever. I don't know, you know, whether it's setbacks or type of construction.
And one of the issues that we had when we've discussed this in the past is, you know, years ago there's been ETJ releases, and then say something falls through, recession, economy, development company, or somebody goes under. We have no way to get back or retract that ETJ. Once it's there and they establish zoning in 60 days, it's their baby. And then 10 years later, like I think we dealt with that in 16 or 17, a whole new plan for some of those areas that was never intended to be there based on our identification of corridor projects. But
I don't know that we have to necessarily set rules for when we will and when we won't, but I certainly think that if we state what our intent is, that way if somebody comes and says, if individuals come and want us to, for the most part, when individuals come and say we want to be released, it's almost automatic. I don't remember a time when we ever said no. The question is how do we approach it when the property owner says, whether it be commercial or residential, when the town wants it and the property owner says no. And I, I think that if, not necessarily that we have a policy, but we certainly can declare an inclination or a tendency. It lets people know whether or not it's going to be worth the fight, and if they have a chance of winning. I mean, if I was the town and we stated that we're not going to give ETJ to people that have really wide driveways. I'm just making something up. Then if you have if they want a ETJ over a bunch of really wide driveways, they know I'm probably not going to get it. So they would avoid even asking, and we can avoid at least the obvious conflict.
Part of what we looked at in the past several years when we've talked about it was not particularly a policy, but we wish there was a way we could identify corridors like our 2030 horizon and other things. So if somebody's going to move into an area or an address, the general public have no way at this point, unless they come and ask specifically, to know what government's plan might be for those areas that they're moving into. I don't know how we fix that. I don't think we do, other than just try to encourage realtors to, talk to the municipalities or the counties to identify what's potentially coming to those areas. Because we get the fallback from it unintentionally.
Well, it's just like the Dollar General down on Shears Road. One side of the street is under Mooresville's jurisdiction, and then the other side is not. So we need to figure out some way to identify where that growth's going to be, corridor specific, which direction is the path of progress. And if Mooresville, Troutman, Statesville spends their dollars in a particular area trying to improve something, then maybe that is an appropriate municipal release. But my phone has rang off the hook after this public hearing, and there are a lot of folks that they are not ready to sell their property for development. They want it to stay as much like they have always had it, and that's a hard call, because the two greatest powers that this board has is, one, removing tax dollars from someone's wallet, and two is limiting their property owners' rights. Correct. And we need a full-scale discussion on this, and to take a deep dive of how can we satisfy the offended without offending the satisfied. And figure out.
And we're going to put that on a stone somewhere.
On a plaque.
In front of us. Well, and that's the reason I brought this up, because I think we need to address it. And Matthew, if you can look to see if there's a middle way that we can accomplish what I think, we have common goals regardless about transportation and trying to have consistent, regulation of driveway cuts and those kind of things, so that ultimately, when it is built out, because it will likely get built out, then we don't have a mishmash. But on the other hand, just like saying, I'm not interested in limiting people's rights to develop their property if it's RA and they choose to live in that RA and not want to change it, then we shouldn't be putting restrictions on it that go beyond what our limited desire is in terms of transportation, let's say, that affects everybody.
I think something that would be good to come back.
Transportation, and some kind of overlay or something that we can come up with, which is sort of a corridor piece. But
I would like to know what is the consistency between Statesville, Troutman, and Mooresville as far as their town zoning ordinances. Are they consistent when it comes to driveway cuts and stuff? If we can find some middle ground there and it's consistent, then maybe we can do something to make our ordinance like some of the municipalities. Or is there an opportunity to do that maybe in districts where we just don't want to create a policy or change an ordinance that's going to affect someone in rural America to try to fix a problem in a more urban environment, and then impose those rules on folks that are in the rural environment. So,
which is why we have ETJ.
Yeah. Great job.
Well, does that give you enough to get your hands around and dig into?
It does, yes. I worked on the agenda today and already sent a list of things to Mr. Todd, so he has one more to add to his list. So,
And that's for the fall agenda, but that's 2020.
Okay. Well, that's all I had. Any preview of the county manager's report? You want to tip your hand here?
I certainly can. Just two updates for the board. One is just to notify you that we have changed the date for the fall retreat. Instead of November the 8th, it will now be November the 15th, so it's 1 week further. November the 15th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. still at the public library. So I think that Ms. Anderson has already sent out a calendar request to everybody to make sure
Thank
that's...
you for your accommodation.
You are welcome.
Thank your sons for their service.
Absolutely. So the other announcement is just that I think everybody got an invitation from Senator Sawyer, but this Friday, October the 18th at 9 a.m., our representatives and senator is going to provide a briefing to the board regarding the North Carolina Department of Transportation budget shortfalls. So if you can make it, that would be great. Staff will certainly be there, and we'll share information that we gather from that update as well.
Where is that going to be?
At the CATS facility in Troutman. And that's all.
And that will be, on the fall retreat, that will be until 5 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
That's
From
at
8
9
a.m. to
o'clock.
5 p.m.
9
on
a.m.
November the 15th.
Okay. I have to figure that one out. I've got a presentation for the district Rotary that day.
There is always a possibility we could end a little sooner. So we will certainly keep you going. And if the board is willing, sometimes we break for lunch. We could do a working lunch and get you out of there a little sooner if the board is okay continuing to work through lunch.
Do we have a county helicopter? Because my gig that night is in Valentine.
Ooh.
Well, that's only a 3-hour drive. It's in Charlotte.
You use the toll road. Get there faster.
Yeah, you're my transponder, I guess. I can do that. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay.
If you'd voted for the choo-choo train, you could have taken it, Tom.
That's right. Mm-hmm. I don't know how we'd have carried all that equipment on it, but anyway.
Okay, well, thank you, Beth. All right, at this time, we will go into a closed session for a personnel matter pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11, subsection A6. And now, closed session.